Hello, this is Mr. Maximus Film, and today I kicked off my Pink Floyd discography reviews with Piper at the Gates of Dawn, released in 1967, and today I'm continuing that with their second album. Actually, it's the same day, I'm doing two in one day. Um, and this is their second album, A Saucerful of Secrets, released in 1968. And by this point, and as you probably heard in the last album review, Syd Barrett was sort of the controller of the album, sort of had the creative control of the band, and now he went crazy. In the middle of the sessions, he took way too much LSD, became disjointed and disconnected from the rest of the world and the rest of the band, and left. And they brought in a friend of his and the rest of the band, David Gilmour, a good virtuoso guitarist, to replace Syd Barrett. And what David Gilmour does and has an impact of the band is makes the music a lot more spacier, a lot more space rock in this album. Because of David Gilmour's solos, which are more drawn out and more, the emphasis of every single note is a lot more apparent than on Syd Barrett's solos, which are very scrambly and hectic. And David Gilmour's vocals are also not as sharp as Syd Barrett's. They're more floaty and lofty and soothing than Syd Barrett's more childish, sharp, to-the-point vocals on Piper. Syd Barrett only was in the recording on this album, but he only has one song that is his, which is Jug Band Blues. The rest of the songs are sort of more of a democratic atmosphere for the band. But the thing I love about this is not Pink Floyd's best album in any stretch of the imagination. It's in the middle for me. But because this is the beginning of Pink Floyd's transitional phase where they haven't got their footing. From this album to metal, they haven't got their footing yet because they lost their principal songwriter. So it's more of a democratic atmosphere. Everybody's contributing on this album. But what really stands out for me, this is Richard Wright's heyday. This is where Richard Wright comes in with his best songwriting. I mean, Summer 68 is good on Atom Heart Mother, and Sisyphus on Umaguma is okay, but these two compositions that he has on this album are freaking fantastic. They're great. His vocals are much like David Gilmour's, and they're very lofty and psychedelic and dreamy. And he uses that and creates this sort of psychedelic space atmosphere. His piano work is very spacey and very drawn out, and he uses a lot of sound effects. Remember and Day and Seesaw are fantastic. Those are his two compositions on this album, and they're just fantastic. They have, on Seesaw there's a lot of sound effects and a lot of glockenspiel, random ramblings, and this very atmospheric sort of guitar work by David Gilmour. And that's fantastic. And Remember a Day has this great groove going on with the piano, and the drums are sort of pounding in this, very nice, good, rolling fashion. So his compositions are fantastic. The rest of the band is pretty good. This is also the mark of a more matured Roger Waters. Take Thy Stethoscope and Walk. While it's dark, it's still very childlike. Set the Controls for the Heart of the Sun, which is Roger Waters' composition on this album, is very more matured, more philosophical sort of atmosphere to it. But the music on that is very spacey, and the drums sort of pound throughout the entire thing, creating this sort of hypnosis effect. David Gilmour's solos are very spacey. They have a lot of echo and reverb, especially on Let There Be More Light. On the opening track for the album, it has a lot of echo and reverb on that, and it's really rambling. It's like a, 3-minute solo at the end of that album. And what David Gilmour does is he has vocals, yes, but his vocals are usually in conjunction with Richard Wright because they know how to harmonize with each other, because their two voices are perfect. They complement each other perfectly, and so they often do duets on this album, which is a cool thing. Another good point about this album is another two things are established for the Floyd. Corporal Clegg establishes Roger Waters' obsession with his father's death and war, which later crop up in The Wall in the final cut, and a bit in the Dark Side of the Moon, just a tad. And that opens up that theme. It's about war. It's about, making fun of the importance of war, and that would later be revisited. So that's important. Another important thing is the title track, A Saucerful of Secrets, is one of Pink Floyd's first avant-garde instrumental texture tracks, like Quicksilver on More, and a lot of the stuff on Umaguma. It's more textury than anything. It's not really a song. It's all texture, which would be later important in developing the Floyd sound. Looking at the track listing again, so I basically covered all the tracks except for Jug Band Blues, which is Syd Barrett's farewell track. That's just him saying goodbye to the world, saying goodbye. I'm obviously not needed here anymore in the band. I don't care if nothing is mine. It's just him basically describing he's gone crazy and he's gone, which is kind of creepy. It's an eerie way to finish the album. And this album is a lot more spacier than the last one, if that's even possible. It's a lot more spacier. The solos are more drawn out. The textures are more developed in this album. And it's less about songwriting. And it's more about instrumental freakouts, which is what Pink Floyd would be known for the next couple of years. And this is when this album was not as popular as The Piper to the Gates of Dawn. The Piper to the Gates of Dawn was very popular. I think it went to #1, I think. But this album sort of established Pink Floyd as more of a cult band. And they would be a cult band to metal. Dark Side of the Moon is when they came into commercial success. But they were pretty much a cult band right now. Some issues with this album I explained all the good points, but some issues is, while A Saucerful of Secrets is important in the band's development, the title track, it's boring. I hate that track. Silence. Awkward pause. Because while it's interesting and while I like that syncopated pandemonium part where Nick Mason goes freak out on the drums, it's boring. I mean, it takes forever to get into that syncopated pandemonium part, and it's just kind of there. It's just boring, and it's eerie, and it's scary, and there's a lot of cool effects done, but they should have put more of a melody part. Like in Shine On You Crazy Diamond, there's a melody to it in the middle of all the textures that are opened. This one doesn't even have any sort of melody in it, which I like to see in a song, a good melody. So that's the problem with that, and that's 10 minutes. And another bad thing is the production on this album is very muddled compared to Piper. The production is very muddled and a lot more muddy, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but it kind of detracts from the overall sound. The end. And those two factors, and the fact that Pink Floyd is in transition phase and they don't really know what to do, sort of all these random ramblings from each of the members, which are good, but it's sort of you can hear it in the album that they don't know what to do. That is why I'm giving this album a 3.5 out of 5. I think that is a good sort of standing because of the points I just said. That's why I knocked off. And so, looking at the packaging, the packaging is much darker than the other album, which reflects the music. It's a lot more psychedelic and spacey. First one done by Hypnosis, who would later do other covers by the band. Pink Floyd on the top, sort of this random psychedelic collage with the band right there, and just sort of this psychedelic collage of the band in the back with the track listing. So, 9 minutes, God. This is Mr. Max's film. This is Saucerful of Secrets. This is Pink Floyd. And I am done with album reviews for today. I've done 2. Hope you enjoyed them. Goodbye.